Oh, look at Casey anticipating that. Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to Disciple Fast Track Old Testament Study Manual, Chapter 8, People with a King. Last week we had the people without a king, which we dove into the terrible portions of Joshua and Judges. We found really the embodiment of some of that Deuteronomy words that we've been reading in Shema. And the people of God take the land, and what are they doing? Almost immediately they're forgetful. And we kind of concluded last week that we're forgetful. We are like our brothers and sisters, the Israelites. Oftentimes we go through the same kind of habits and steps that we saw, which was the pattern was apostasy, punishment, penitence, and peace. And so the people of God come to this stage of their history, and we're going to look at the kingship. And so behind me on the screen, you see kingship and temple. Got some kings up there, and then you've got the phrase like other nations. So that's a phrase that you're going to hear a few times. We're going to look, if you want to open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel 8, that's where we're going to find the first time that we open up the scriptures is to this moment that is just so significant for the people of God who understood themselves to follow after the commandment of God, which was to be like Yahweh in the world, to be priestly kingdom and holy nation. They were to be the lights of the world. They were God's project, God's body, the people who were following after Yahweh as hope of the world, to embody what it meant to look like Yahweh for the world around them. And there was something special about that they were kind of set apart. So I'm going to use that phrase, set apart. And for some of you who have been Nazarenes for a while, that word set apart will kind of trigger a the holiness word. Oh, I've heard that. Or the word sanctification, right? There's this set apartness of the people of God that kind of has been used in Nazarene circles since the beginning of Nazarene time, right? So not that would make us different than other denominations, but I do think that the Church of the Nazarene in particular has sensed that holiness, which I think is most easily described as Christ-likeness, would be a focus on, would be the end goal of who we are as people of God, together walking towards Christ-likeness. And there's something about that word set apart that I think is very interesting in Scripture and for us today. What does holiness look like? And as we look at today's Scripture, I think we will end up looking at our own lives as well, asking the question, how are we set apart? And what does set apartness look like? Does that make sense? Because I think that throughout different times and spaces, in even biblical history, that set apartness looks different. But I think answering the question, what do the people of God, how are they different? One of the reasons they were different was because they weren't like other nations. There was a sense that God had solely loved them, that they were to be a light to the nations, and their set apartness was that God fought for them and they did not fight for themselves, right? You have some of those stories that I think are so incredible of the kind of the amazing character of God being leading the way through the Red Sea, through the Jordan River, through battles that were incomprehensible, but somehow, rather than them fighting for themselves, God was fighting for them. And then also that they were governed by God himself, even going back to Genesis 12, 1-3, right? I will be your God. You will be my people. That there will be a sense that I will be blessed, that you will be a blessing to all the nations of the earth. There will be something about the project for the salvation of and hope for the whole world is that I will be your God. You will be my people, and you will reflect me to the world and bring hope. And we saw that project was hard because the people of God were forgetful, right? And so we get to this point in biblical history when we come to 1 Samuel 8, and I hope that you find both empathy and sadness in the moment, right? Sadness for what has come, but empathy because we too are similar to our ancestors, is that we are forgetful, and we don't necessarily always follow the call of God on our lives. So I'm going to read on page 60 our human condition, and find that back quickly with the mark of discipleship on page 66, and then we're going to turn right to We're going to skip a little bit over Samuel and go to Saul in the interest of time, because I remember when I asked Marty to teach this class for me one time when I had to miss, and he was like, "You're asking me to go from Samuel to the end of Solomon in like 45 minutes? Jason, that's a semester." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what happens in Disciple. We do semester at a time each week." And so here we go. We demand leaders, hoping they will bring security and peace. We want our leaders to make decisions for us, to tell us what to do, so we won't have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions. But power tends to corrupt. And we discovered that our leaders, like us, have feet of clay. I always find it so interesting that every couple of years, this happens like right around election season, that we have this chapter and last chapter. Mark of Discipleship on page 66. Disciples maintain a perspective on leadership that supports and respects godly leaders, but gives true allegiance only to God. And so, if you had a chance to read the Bible teaching this week, you saw how quickly it went from Samuel to Saul to David to Solomon to the breaking of the kingdoms into the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, setting this up for next week, which begins. Next week is Thanksgiving. This was our couplet between Fall Fest and Thanksgiving break, which was people without a king and people with a king. A week off, and then we'll have 3 weeks on exile before we enter our Christmas break. I think that's how that works in my head. It worked out really well, and I'm just continuing to pray for no ice storms, because it's always terrible when we get to ice storms. So you've set the scene of the people of God understanding themselves as priestly kingdom and holy nation, the set apart people of God for the hope of the world, governed not by humans and kings with temples and crowns, but with the very Spirit of God leading them. And they're almost somewhat of a nomadic people, following after God as a God following them with clouds of covering by day and fire by night, and this nomadic group of people who are settling into the promised land. And they have these few generations of difficulty with their leaders finding that pattern. And you've got a leader named Samuel coming after, and let me tell you about what happens to Samuel's and the people of God and Samuel's sons. You'll find that same pattern that we found in Judges is making itself into the kingship too. Okay. I looked at the words, Mike, and I had to put my glasses and look down, and it was just a mess of words. Now it's not. Okay. Again, I hope that you find both sadness and empathy as we read these words. So 1 Samuel 8, let's start with verse 4. Let's start with verse 1, sorry. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. So leaders, just like we saw in the book of Judges. The name of his first son was Joel. The name of his second, Abijah. So bad that. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not follow in his ways. They turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. I'm going to keep going in verse 4 in a second. But remember when we had 3 weeks ago just about like the list of like what would you fix in the world? Weren't even those 3 things mentioned, right? We had greed, selfishness, injustice, right? Like those were like right off the bat, some of those words that we mentioned. We're like, if you could fix something, what would you fix? I just remember those 3 things being, when I read this, I was like, oh, disciple already knows. Those are terrible things, right? Corruption, hypocrisy, injustice, greed, right? Terrible. Okay. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel and said to him, you are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us, like other nations. But this thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to govern us. But the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they've rejected me for being king over them. And this is so sad to hear. Just as they have done to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so also as they are doing to you. Now then, listen to their voice only. You shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who will reign over them. I'm going to read this next paragraph quickly, but I want you to hear how many times the word take is seen in this paragraph. So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will govern over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots to be his horsemen and to run after his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orders and give them to his courtiers. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards. He will take your male and female slaves and the best of your cattle. He will take 1/10 of your flocks. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, but we are determined to have a king over us, so that we may be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles." When Samuel had heard all these words to the people, he repeated them into the ears of the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to their voice and set a king over them." Samuel then said to the people of Israel, "Each of you return home." And this begins the journey of the people of God into kingship. And I've said it 3 times, but maybe the 4th. I hope you find a deep sadness in these moments, which is the people of God find themselves essentially saying no to the project, but also an empathy in the temptation to be like other nations is alive and well in the hearts of the people of God for all time. I don't mean to pick on Rob because I know he doesn't want to be on camera or answer too many questions. But Rob's, when we listed the things we could fix of Christian hypocrisy, that is very high, I think, on all of our lists. And when you think of the project of the church and what it means for us to be the set-apart people of God, the ones who have been set aside to look like Christ and be Christ's hope and nation for the world, the temptation has never gone away to be like other nations. And my study of the church is such an interesting one because I think that throughout human history, not just the people of God have said to themselves, we want to be, God, can't we just have a little bit of what's out there, right? And I want the church so badly to reflect Christ-likeness. But there's such a temptation. I don't think, and I'm not saying that OKC First Church is exempt from the temptation to be like other nations. But as I look around, I do wonder if the church gets wrapped up in the temptation to say, rather than being the set-apart people of God, the new project to be priestly kingdom, holy nation, to be body of Christ, hope for the world, I think sometimes the church looks outside and says, what are some of the practices that we can be like in the world? And we miss what it means for us to be set apart. And that voice of holiness and set-apartness and sanctification, I want to deeply matter and root us here. Because I think that it's every organization. There's just this great temptation to look across and say, can we use some of those practices here? And does that hurt our distinct calling to be the set apart, sanctified people of God, reflecting the holiness of Christ to the world? I've made a jump here from this moment of kingship to modern day church. But can you see that yourself as you look at the church project? I'm going to let some of you answer that, because maybe I don't know if I'm connecting. Oh, Mike, you're shaking your head. I'm going to pick on you. You're not here, so you can't be mad at me. What do you think? What do you think? You're on mute, by the way.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. Yes, I agree with you. That's why I was shaking my head.
Well, go on.
I won't do that again. We approach Scripture, and we approach the Scriptures we've read as usually applying to somebody else, applied long ago, applied to somebody else, applied to Jesus, applied to folks closest to Jesus. But we're far enough away, feel comfortable in saying that maybe doesn't apply to us. Maybe the things that Jesus did aren't really things that we would do. Even though it seems Scripture's pretty clear that the evidence of this set aside is that you do the things that Jesus does, and you look like Jesus does. And although there's plenty that prevents us from being anything but humble by seeing how little we reflect, the reality is I don't see anywhere in Scripture where it doesn't that it means that healings and feeding and raising from the dead and all of its manifestations is not our work. So, yeah, that's how I hear it from what you were saying.
Thanks, Mike. I won't call on anybody else, but I would like to hear from someone else before we continue. Yeah, Holly's asking for maybe some examples.
Like in a more modern day.
Yeah, sure. I think that the project for the church, and I think almost every generation, is asking itself the question, what does holiness look like? Am I to be set apart, or is the project for us to the temptation for us to be able to say, is there something beyond Christ's likeness that's more important to us? So, for example, I don't want to be too judgmental for the different projects, because I do think that people are doing the best they can with what they've been given at times, and so I want to be able to have grace for the situation and time. But I'll say like 1980s, 1990s church growth movement, right, would have been something that we can look back now on and kind of say, okay, that was the project, was to kind of reach the world for Christ, which is a beautiful project, right? Does that make sense? Like there was something about like, we are going to focus on the evangelism of the world. And the kind of the post critique of that from, 40 years later, 30 years later, is what you would have some people saying kind of a watering down of the gospel, and not looking at Christ's likeness, but using maybe business practices for growth that would be a gathering place, and using kind of, rather than transformation into Christ's likeness, rather than the good news of the gospel of Christ that can cover and redeem us from all sin and move us into what it looks like to look like Jesus, more like 10 ways to love your spouse, right? 5 ways to get out of debt, right? Which are good and wonderful things. But like looking at the project, like rather than looking at like individuals, what's the thing that's going to attract as many? I'll say this. I'm say this with someone in mind, like how can we get as many families, right, that we can get in so we can grow and then so we can continue to reach, right? Which I think is, the behind that I think is a beautiful intention, right? But I think that the set apartness can be lost with this, the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, when there were, and I think those churches could have been doing the best they had with sometimes they was brought down. Does that make sense? Because the older I get, I think the more understanding I get for people, and I think the more graceful I get. I think my 20s and 30s, I was pretty judgmental of everyone did it the wrong way. And I think, I don't know what it was about turning 40. Maybe it's the glasses. Maybe it's something about the glasses. But I feel like now when I hear people critiquing other projects, I think, well, they did the best they could. But I don't want the church to lose its way for the sake of anything that gets us off the path of Jesus. Does that make sense? So when John preaches, he preaches from Scripture, right? In a building surrounded by stained glass. And the project now in some churches from that kind of jumping off point of kind of a church growth movement is to preach about maybe more like how to win friends and influence people in a box without stained glass than it is to focus on the person of Jesus from Scripture towards your sainthood and Christ-likeness. Does that make sense? I say that from a place that wants to be that, and I hope it doesn't say like those places are wrong. Does that make sense? Because I really don't want people to think that this way is the only way. I'll give you an example of that. Craig Groeschel at Life Church has told individuals, we are a front porch. We are beginning to tell the story of God. There are thousands of people who would not have come to Christ without us. And I firmly believe that. And he also has said to at least we are known two small groups of individuals, one-to-one, he has said, if you are here and you are not growing in a depth that you would like to grow, there's a church called OKC First Church of the Nazarene that we think is doing a really neat thing that you might fit who you are.
By the way,
Yeah.
that reminds me, my women's group at Life Church, they're all going to come to the
Harvest
service for Monday.
Oh, the Monday, Thursday service? It's amazing. Like, thank you. Because does that make sense? I don't want the project for you to hear me say that church is bad. Every church is different. And so like what Craig has done, and my friends who serve at Life Church, I'm really close with the Life Church, the pastor at Mustang. It's an amazing project. Like they know their goal and they know themselves as front porch. And my friend has said, yeah, we want to, if people get into the place after a number of years and we have felt like, okay, maybe there's a smaller level of discipleship or level of teaching or level of depth, and we need to make sure that they go somewhere else. I think that's amazing, right? So I do think there's different goals. I took a long time answering Holly's question of give me an example, but I hope that it was throughout history. I think the church has had the temptation of answering the question, okay, in evangelism and outreach, to reach people for the light of the world, how do I compromise that set apartness and what's okay and what's not? And I think personally, when the project becomes not moving people towards Christ-likeness, I struggle with it. I'll just, to be honest with you, like to me, like the project, when we use business practices or psychology practices or growth practices or whatever that project becomes. And I think maybe I could say those things because I was a part of some of those, right? When you're just trying to think like, what are we doing here? What's the project look like? So I don't know. I struggle with this because, well, I talked about it a little bit in Sunday school. And this is going to get off the wheels. And I'm sorry for my people on YouTube. This is going to be longer than usual and not as directed, not as focused. I should have worked on this a little bit more before. So my friend Shane has a podcast called In Shane and the Membrane. And it's a big part of this Sunday school class. And it is a ridiculous podcast. And I love it. It's like he's done like 50 of them. And I listen to every one, sometimes twice. And he told a story this last week about uh, uh, he was at Walmart, and there was this tub that he needed, but it didn't have a cover, and it didn't have any stickers, and there's no way to buy for it. And he's like, I spend $1,000 a month at Walmart. They want me to have this. And so he just is like, if I take it to if they tried to buy it, I'll go to customer service. And he's just like, it goes to the customer service line. It's a long customer service line. And so Shane's like, you know what? Walmart wants me to have this. And so Shane walks, he's walking out of Walmart, and there's this woman there. And she's, sometimes they have people that go check your receipt or everything. And she goes, do you have your receipt? And Shane pats his pockets and says, no. Well, he knows that he does not have a receipt. Why is he patting his pockets, right? And so she starts engaging this other person, and he just walks out with this tub, $7 to $12 tub. And he is justifying this act of they want me to have the tub. They don't want me to go through this rigmarole. There's no way they would have taken it to the front. Customer service would have said they can't buy it. They would have taken it to the back. They would have destroyed it because they can't sell it because there's no markers for it. And so Shane just walks out with the tub. And I love this story because I think that many of us have moments in the everyday moments of our life are asking the question, what does my set apartness look like? What does my holiness look like? And you're given challenges and choices throughout the day. So his friend Ken, who's his podcast guest, is like, this is shoplifting. You are a shoplifter. And he's like, Shane's like, I am not a shoplifter. They wanted me to have that. And so he emails Walmart and is like, I'd like to make this right. This is the story. This is what we did. And so they write back, they're like, tub's on us. They're like, we don't need your money. Thanks for being such a loyal customer. We probably could have maybe found a way to charge you some funds, but you know what? We're so grateful for you. We want you to have a good customer experience. So Shane comes back to Ken and is like, ta-da! They wanted me to have the tub. There's no way that they didn't want me to have this tub. And look, now I've got a good customer service experience. And I'm able to go back, and if I have a bad customer service experience, maybe I vow off Walmart and I'm only going to shop at other places. And now I'm Walmart till I die. You know what I mean? I am forever going to be a Walmart customer. So the project of me walking out with the tub was the end project that was the good deed, the good life in the world. And I love Ken is so perplexed about why I love this story so much. But I love this story because I think that it shows so many of us in our lives. I believe you are given choices of holiness time and again, all throughout your day, of asking the question, what does it mean for me to follow after Jesus? What does my set apartness look like? And I think there's lots of gray areas. Does that make sense? I just think there's tons of gray. So I haven't told this to Shane yet, and I know Ken will make me mad, but I think this is so interesting how we approach this particular subject. What I want to tell Ken is, was Walmart made for man, or was man made for Walmart? I want to be able to look at some of these stories about what does Christ-likeness look like? What would Jesus do bracelet look like? You have been called by God and set apart to be part of the church of God, which is the hope for the world. Now, how are you to act in the world? What does your set apartness look like? What habits and practices do I take part in? And I think the Church of the Nazarene for years has been able to answer that question. And for years, I think we have said, my set apartness looks like not doing particular activities. Right? This goes back to, I'm preaching my sermon from 2 Sundays ago. I'm sorry, this happens a lot when I preach because I just focus on what I'm thinking about. But I do think that there are different ways to look at what holiness looks like. So when we get to Jesus, I think when we're struggling with some of this question, what does holiness look like? Not to partaking in things or partaking in particular things. I think that over time, there's been a really interesting tug of war or teeter-totter about how we are to be in the world. I'm way off of this is so far from my notes. But I want to say this about my aunt. So what broke, I'm not going to put this on YouTube. Sorry, I'm going to have to find a way to put this on a secret channel or something. So So my Aunt Nadine was a wonderful, incredible woman, one of my mom's sisters. And when she got married, she wanted to take a wedding ring. And it broke my family's path of how to be together in the world. Because at the time, Nazarenes were people that women did not cut their hair short, and women did not wear rings or earrings. Did you know that? Holly, this is new to Holly. Some of you know that the Church of the Nazarene history
They didn't wear rings?
didn't wear rings.
What?
They told us, 'cause when we were missionaries,
Yeah.
when we were missionaries in Africa, all the women over there, they didn't wear jewelry. Of course, they didn't wear pants. They didn't wear makeup. And when we signed up to go, we were there for 4 years. My dad, kid you not, was like, my wife is going to wear makeup. My wife is going to wear rings. She's going to wear pants if she wants to. But she really didn't wear pants. She kind of took that one back. But he was like, if we're going to go, my wife is going to do these things. And so they let us still go. Nazarene. But yeah, they let us still go. But yes, that was in 86. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, in Intro to Ministry, I don't remember, there was a GS who came and spoke to us. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember a lot of things he said. But one of the things he said was he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. When he took office, he said the other GSs, they all did this. On their desk, there's a cup, and he put his wedding ring in the cup, and when he leaves office, the wedding ring will go back on.
What?
They still weren't. That's when we were freshmen in college.
So when my Aunt Nadine said in her wedding that she would take a ring, the rest of the family never stepped foot in the Nazarene church again, because this is so far from the message of Kings, Jason. Because they had said the Church of the Nazarene has lost its way of what it means for them to be set apart. We do not adorn ourselves with jewelry. We do not. Women wear dresses or skirts. Women have put their hair in buns. They do not cut their hair. They do not wear rings. And Nadine was just enough of a rebel that she was taking a ring when she married Hep, and she cut her hair. And the Seward tribe splits, and everyone else goes to the Bible Missionary Church. And then my family was the branch of my tree were the absolute rebels.
Jason, why do you not think this deals directly with your message from Kings? I think this idea that you've been communicating of you can be a part of this thing that's amazing, or you can do and be like everybody else. And isn't that the same invitation today? You can follow Jesus in ways that you can't even imagine, or you can do just what everybody else does.
And that discernment is so important, Mike, because there are certain people who've gone the way where they're just like, I can follow Jesus in this way, and it's off the rails, right? On both sides, whether it be like, I like to play a game with some of the staff, is like, is it a weed shop or is it a church? Like if it's like, holy grounds, or, is it coffee shop, weed shop, or church? Like, you don't know, you know what I mean? Like, and people have strong feelings about marijuana or not, but it's just kind of like, you know what? Like, I'm not sure. That was off. I'm all over the place tonight, Mike. Yes, but there's something. I'm going to say one thing. I want Holly. I want to hear what you have to say. But there's something about the story of wedding rings. They had so focused on how we were set apart, they just missed the message, right? Like they just missed what was holiness. What did holiness look like? Their set apartness, I think, went the wrong way, right? And it has been 3 generations. My mother is trying to find these stories, because guess what? The grandchildren of all of the Bible missionary Sewards, they all wear rings and all cut their hair, right? So the thing that this fractured our family. My mom, Nadine's wedding was the marker of that we no longer get together with the 3 other branches of that family because of what we did to break with the traditions that we would be like other nations.
That's the problem with having a handbook.
Okay. She said that's the problem with having a handbook. Vicky said that's the problem with having a handbook.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another story about that. So there's a woman named Ruby Fulton, and she was a Methodist pastor's kid, but Nazarene through and through. And she had like a 1964 church manual, like on her shelf. And I picked it up and was looking through it, and I found one of the rules to live by, the manual, Vicky. And it said, Nazarenes shall not take the Sunday paper, because that's the breaking of the Sabbath, right? Like breaking of the Sabbath.
Oh.
Like that was like a Brad Boxberger is laughing so hard. Hope that you're catching this on camera. Brad says it's so stupid, and right, like, so I'm looking through the manual, and I look down, and it's the Sunday paper with the comics and all of the coupons. And I'm sitting there with Ruby, and like, Ruby, do you follow all the rules in the Church of Nazarene manual? Never broken a rule. Just like, follow it to a T. You know what I mean? I was just like, and that, for those of you who know Ruby, she was real feisty. I loved her so much. She taught me a lot about being a pastor. And I was like, oh, Sunday paper. I love the comics. I love when the comics come in color. Me too, Pastor Jason. You know what I mean? It's like, and you know what? Coupons. Great stewardship. You're right. You've got the coupons, double coupon day at the grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, nothing's better than like using the gifts that God has given us and being a good steward. He goes, you're right. I was like, oh, Ruby, can I read you this rule from the 1964 Church of the Nazarene manual? And Reggie goes, let me see that. This is like, and she could not believe that she had broken the rules, right? Because she had so believed that she was so set apart and not like other people. It's the discernment is so interesting because, Vicky, generations, things change from generation to generation. Yet there's still the call for the people of God to be priestly kingdom and holy nation. And I think that we're called to look and be different. And that is the biggest thing to me about the whole project of this class and this whole project of Christianity. It is not a list of rules and a manual. It is wisdom. We want you to be wise people who enter the world and enter into Walmart and say, should I take this tub or should I leave this tub? Right? And, Shane has said, I have shoplifted 3 times in 30 years. It's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm just like, it's such a hilarious proposition, right? Because we all are tasked with the tub that we really need that is unmarked without a lid. And what are we to do? I just like, do you leave it and drive to Home Depot? Do you wait the 45 minutes in line to then just have them throw it away? The tub, I think, for me, will always and forever be one of my favorite illustrations, because we all are tasked with, what is your Christ-likeness going to look like? What is it going to look like in front of people? I'm awfully fond of your son, and I'm wondering, like, he's watching mom and dad, right? Like, what are the choices that Kinsler's looking at to sort of see, how are mom and dad choosing what their Christ-likeness looks like? Because here's the deal. When I'm after wisdom for you, because your Christ-likeness is going to look different than my Christ-likeness. I truly believe that. You have different gifts and graces and situations and challenges and trials. Beth, your life looks different than mine. You've had challenges in your later years you never anticipated. What is my Christ-likeness going to look like at this stage of my life now? It's going to look different than Hayden's. It's just such an interesting project. It's not a list of rules. The whole project is not a list of rules. The whole project is, do we trust our lives with Christ to speak to us that we might discern how to live in the world and to know our calling and to know what it means for us to be a good neighbor and to know what it means to be a good steward? I think that we're all challenged with this question of holiness or priestly kingdom, holy nation. What does the embodiment look like for you? And I don't think I think our pastors can pray with you and help you discern if you so need that. But there's going to be a moment when you're walking out of that store or not with that tub, thinking to yourself, you can't call your pastor at this moment. So what is it with this moment? I'll never forget last year's disciple with Laura Hardy, who when positioned with the opportunity to have a young girl once again go to her 5th foster home that semester with 3 weeks left in the semester, and that she would not have a chance, actually she's already missed 2 years of school, to take her year-end tests within the same classroom. And she said in this class, we helped her through some of those moments with Jalen. And she said to us, I didn't even have to pray. And Ken was gone, and I didn't even have to ask Ken. I just knew, discerned in my heart, that girl's coming home to live with me. And we all cried with her because that was a hard project, that she took that foster child into her home. But I just said to her, I was like, that is discernment, to have a moment in front of you, to say, what am I to do right now? And have the Spirit just say, you bring her home. But that's not your calling, but that was her calling at the time, right? That was the revelation of God in her heart through the Spirit of God, through prayer, allowing her to be able to say yes to Jesus in that moment. And I think you're all given those moments too. It's not just a tub, it's a moment of, okay, what is it right now in front of me that God has placed and given me to do in the world? Mike, you look like you want to say something. No. Well, you can, because I've been talking a lot. It's 7:42. How in the world? People watching on YouTube, I'm not even going to post this. Kelly Baker's going to be so mad at me because she's not here tonight. Okay. The people of God are given a task. In some ways, they take the easy way out to say, give us a king anyway. Right? Like, we don't want to do it on our own. We don't want to have those choices on our own. We want to be like other nations. And they're given kings. And I'm going to ask more questions with here. I hope you will answer me out loud. As you look at Saul and David and Solomon, what did you see in kingship that was good and bad? Would anybody venture to want to share with? That's my friend Brad Boxberg. Who's going to be Brad?
This is Brad. It was right as God was telling Samuel. They were Pharaoh, and they were in Egypt, but they called it Israel.
Great, write that down. Take notes on that, what Brad said.
Wow.
Like,
I'm sitting by you.
They've just been called out of it, right? But I mean, it's the trouble with power, right? Like, power tends to corrupt, right? Like, you've been hearing that, especially around these moments of elections, right? Like, power tends to corrupt, right? And this is one of those moments where Pastor John would say the words of our friend Samuel were not like prophetic as far as predictive, but prophetic as far as, hey, this is what happens when people rule. There are going to be moments when those in power take and take and take and take and take. And that Hebrew word take is very powerful. So we have Saul, and we have David, and then we have Solomon. And at 7:45, it pains me. Because I need to allow you historically to understand two concepts for the people of God moving forward for us that I've written in bubble letters on the back. Kingship and temple. So the people of God through this season of these kings are going to rely on what it means for the people of God to no longer have God as their governing entity, but a king that is passed along after we see in David this lineage of David, which will lead us all the way to the embodiment of Yahweh in the world, which is Jesus Christ. The second thing that's going to change their kind of structural identity of who they are as a people of God is temple. God has not been a entity that can be captured, right? God is on the move. God is in between. God is with and a movement and a cloud and a fire, right? Like there was something about the nomadic personification of Christ, of Yahweh we see in the world, which is kind of almost like movement and spirit and ruach, right? Like those good words of the spirit of the people of God. And there's going to be something that is going to settle them in one place, and that's going to be temple. And so the people of God's governance during this time period becomes identity shaping for them. They no longer are the nomadic people with the tabernacle that they set up and tear down as they move from place to place. They've been given this land. They're embodying the land. And in the land, the good land that they're trying to inhabit for the sake of the world as a light to the nations, their understanding of God as movement becomes God as more placed. And that place is going to be the temple. And so the temple becomes one of those most distinguishing characteristics for the people of God is how they understand themselves to be the people of God, which is now we are governed by a king, and the lineage of that king matters, and the place of that kingship matters. That's going to be in the southern kingdom of Israel, in the land of Judah, in the capital of Jerusalem. And so historically and geographically, they begin to orient their lives and understanding of their whole identity, what it means to follow after Yahweh, in a whole new way in the world. Does that make sense? I before we can get to exile, because exile is going to be, man, you guys are not embodying what it means to look like Yahweh. And next week, I believe the next chapter is titled Warning, and the one after that is Consequences. Yeah. The next two chapters, when we are going to look at what exile looks like, we're going to be looking at prophets coming to the people of God in the land of Jerusalem saying, this is not what God intended. You have missed the mark of what it means for you to follow after Yahweh. You are not being a light to the nations. And the next chapter, Consequences, are going to be, this land I gave you to govern after what it meant to look like Yahweh to the world, I'm taking you away to a foreign land because you just have done such a bad job on the project. You have forgotten what it means to follow after me. Maybe just for Rob's sake, I'll play this video, one of my all-time favorite videos, in 2 weeks, when the pastor gets up, and John's used it before, and he gets up in front of the church. This pastor gets in front of the church, and he's just like, "Stop it! Stop doing bad things. Do good things. You are terrible at being this Christian. Like, stop embarrassing me." Like, have you seen this video? He's like, Dave, Dave, I'm talking to you. You're terrible at this. Like, I will play this video for you if you haven't seen it. Have you seen it? You have. Like, it's just so good. It's like, it's the prophets being like, "You boys, stop it!" Like, it's just like, and you're all giggling so much, it makes me happy. But it's like the project was forever that the prophets are going to come and they're going to be like, "I told you to take care of the widows and orphans, and here you just exploit them. Stop doing that." You know what I mean? Like, I knew you knew that if you took after other gods, that we would not go well with you. What do you not understand about not worshiping other gods? right? And it's just like, that's Robert. Oh, poor Kyle missed the whole rant. Okay, so, but you can't understand exile without understanding the identity of the people of God, now understanding that we are God's people because we have a king and the temple is here. This is who we are. The pride of building a house of gold and laid in perfectly. This is where God lives. This is who we are. This is, I'm wanting to set up exile because you can't understand exile without understanding kingship and temple. But you can't understand kingship and temple without understanding what God had done through the story of Exodus, of the people, of God bringing them out to this land. So for you to understand Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, almost the biggest chunks of the Old Testament, right? These big prophetic stories. To understand that, you have to have that tied to the identity of people of God being kingship and temple. But to understand kingship and temple, you have to understand that they've come into a land that they've been given and that they've decided that what it means for them to follow after Yahweh is for them to have a place of God and to be ruled by a king. And so you begin to see the cracks in that at the end of our story this week, when you've got a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom of Israel is going to have some consequences first and the southern kingdom next, but those are going to be the warnings we're going to see after Thanksgiving. I will try my best to maybe the Monday after Thanksgiving, just remind you that you're a disciple. Because to me, there's like this time warp when there are holidays, when you're just like, I'm in a Bible study? What is it? Where is that? I don't know if you feel that. To be honest, I feel time warp. I don't know how time works. I just bought a book called How to Inhabit Time, and I cannot wait to read it because I want to know how to inhabit time. I don't know how to do it because time to me does not make sense. How do I have a 15-year-old? That does not make sense to me at all. Where did it go? Like, I don't know. And then, to me, the time warp of Thanksgiving is real. Like, it'll be like next Tuesday night, and you'll be like, where is my disciple book? Am I part of a Bible study? That's how I feel like the next 13 days will go when it comes to Thanksgiving. Because you're going to be playing Uno and Farkle and Quirkle and Rummacube and Chicken Foot. And you're going to forget where your disciple book is. So next week, I better really hurry because I need to print out your sheets because you're going to forget you're in disciple. I need to give you your cheat sheets for next week because you're going to need them. Because I was dumb enough when I started to be like, oh, you've got 2 weeks off. Let me give you double the reading. You'll get so much work done. And then I realized no one was doing anything. So, okay, as I have 6 minutes to print these sheets out for you to have them, just someone give me some commentary on tonight, whether it be holiness or kingship or temple or stories you have of rings or buns and skirts, anything. I'll take anything. You got 6 minutes. Okay. Yeah, Amy.
Oh, I was the first person in my Nazarene church to get pierced ears. I was the rebel. They all did it after me. Everybody. The older cousins, everybody. You're an animal. That's right. Is that what it was?
Anybody else? Yeah, Holly.
John's continual return to the iceberg has been, like, I think so huge because it, goes deeper than just the behaviors, the motivations. I mean, like, if we can understand our motivations for doing things. I mean, I'm not going to explain it well, but that's why it's like time and so well to all of this is like.
So Jason,
Most important to us deep down, and we know that. Are we honest about what it is?
Yes, Mike?
I'm just saying, what's the modern day equivalent of we would like a king? Is it that we would like a pastor? We don't want somebody to show us how to minister. We want somebody to minister for us.
What do you guys think around the room?
I think Mike's got a good point. If we have someone that does it for us, intervenes for us, it takes the pressure off of us. I hear what you're saying, Mike.
or does the work for us.
Yeah,
you know,
you do the work.
like you go visit all the sick people and you take care of the people who are, you know, who need funerals, and you know, we don't need to see the ugly parts of ministry, maybe.
But then I can be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
So we hire a good one to do that for us, and we don't have to worry about it.
Good job, Jason.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's where John's wisdom comes into play when he meets with us as a staff and as a team. He will say, if you are not training people to care for those and to do your job, you are not doing your job. It's harder to do that than to just go do it. But your job is not just to do the work, it's to give people the opportunities to be able to minister alongside of you.
Right.
And it's always so much harder.
Yeah.
Always so much harder. You can just do it yourself. And he will say what's the great temptation for a pastoral team is. So the question that some of you didn't hear from Mike was like, what's the modern day application of what we want a king? Like what are we doing for ourselves? Mike, I think for some people, there would be the temptation, not for any of us, of course, right? But for others, I think there is a temptation to be a Christian kind of when we're around Christians, but like to not when we're at work Monday through Friday, right? Like there's like the bifurcation of our life where we can kind of not be fully moving after Christ at all times in all spaces, where there be a coherence to our lives, but we can kind of maybe put God in a box on Sundays and Wednesdays and then like not reflect that during the rest of the week. What do you guys think the answer to would be an answer to Mike's question, which is, we want a king. We want someone else to do this for us. Might be a different or better answer among us. And Kyle, go ahead.
This kind of goes along with some of the stuff you talked about earlier, but Terry and I left a church that the way that I would explain what you were talking about earlier when Holly asked the question is that there are some places that teach Jesus plus. There is Jesus, there are Christ followers, and then you can have all the things that come with Jesus, and you can have more. And I would say that for me, I notice that people want the formula. That's what they want. I want to know how to succeed, how to be a Christian, how to have it all. Give me the formula and I'll follow it. I want it to be consistent and the same. Yeah. I figured it out. This is what we want, certainty.
Yeah, Kyle, that's really interesting because the project for me, my conversations with Steve right now always come back to wisdom, because I think you're right. There's like, just because we've had people for years say to Steve and to John, yeah, your sermons, but tell me what to do, right? Like, they're so like out there, like you've just told a story. I need 4 steps to, not cheat on my taxes, right? Like that, or just like, does that make sense? Like, you're right. I think that's really insightful, Kyle. Yeah. Say that again, Beth. Make sure you heard.
Pay for the tub.
Pay for the tub. Pay for the tub. Yeah. Like there's something more to following Jesus than kind of having a note card of a to-do list. That if we just, well, Mike, maybe this is it. What do I have to do to get into heaven? Not how do I live a life full of discernment and wisdom that I reflect Christ in my life to the world? Right? Like, give me those things that I don't have to do and what I do have to participate in. And then if I follow those checklists, do we see this in the Pharisees? Don't we see this exact thing in the Pharisees, right? Well, Jesus, what's your favorite commandment? We talked about this 3 weeks ago. Well, it's the Shema, right? Well, who's my neighbor, right? Well, here, let me tell you a story, right? Rather than, well, your neighbor are the people who live to the right, to the left, and across from you. You can ignore the kitty corner ones, right? Like we want those rules to live by, that we make sure we check off on our list. That's why the project for us moving forward this next year, which is John's going to be focusing on just the gospel passages in year A of the lectionary text. And John wants to have a preoccupation with Jesus and prayer. Can I predict Mike's smile on his face? Can I predict the smile on Mike's face? Because I think that we as a church need to do better at teaching you to pray, to discern, to know how to be wise, right? We want you to be able to go to Christ, to pray about whether or not you take that tub out of Walmart or not. Like there are so much that we want to do as a pastoral team to say, okay, we want you to be preoccupied with Jesus and we want you to pray. We want this life to be part of your everyday life, that you're in conversation with Jesus in a discernment way for wisdom. And it's frustrating for people, Kyle. We have had people I know leave here because you've just given me stories. You've not given me like a way to be in the like, and we're like, no, we have had people say, and not as much recently, but we have had people say, you never preach about sanctification. Some of our old timey Nazarenes. And John would just be like, every week, that's all I'm talking about. The sanctification of your life. Like, and he's just like, but you're not saying it's so what Kyle said about the list of rules, it's for some of us, it's a list of keywords. It's almost like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna say, if he says the words holiness, sanctification, and set apart, then we're Nazarene, then we're doing the right thing in the world. And John will say, like, his favorite movie with Inigo Montoya saying, you keep saying that word, but I don't think you know what I think it is.
Determine me what you think it means.
That's what you think.
I don't think it means what you think it means. Right? Because that's what John, I think some of us, it takes more effort to listen to Steve Green and John Middendorf because they're telling a grand movie narrative to try to capture your heart for the Spirit than it is to do necessarily a fill in the blank to-do list of the activity to do that week. It's a little bit harder project, but I think it's worth it. But it can frustrate some people, and it is 8:02. You guys, this has been such an odd week, and I would have liked to have a redo, but maybe this is what the encounter was for. Well, maybe it's what the encounter was for. I will look back and look at my Oh, Holly just made me feel great. She said, maybe I'm discerning the wisdom of the moment. I'm hitting stop on record because this is going to be, I'm not going to redo this, but I've had a couple of you look me in the eye and shake your head with thanksgiving. So thank you. Because I will look at the notes I have prepared and it's nothing like this.